Y'all tell me when. Namaste, my brothers and sisters in Christ. We are thankful and grateful to God for another expression of God's loving kindness, allowing us to be here on this evening. Listen, I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in this afternoon at 12 noon. We had a wonderful, wonderful time out in Mount Airy's parking lot, praying and praising our God. It was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful expression of God's commitment and God's love for the people of God at Mount Airy and beyond. We had some guests that shared with us. So thank you, Mount Airy, for showing up this afternoon. And now I thank you as we continue this series, not only with our partnership with Duke, but also in honor of Community Healing Network, founded by Dr. Enola Aird. Throughout the country during this weekend, there are expressions of Black love, Black joy, Black peace, as she and the organization have made it a mission to engage us in emotional emancipation so that we can free ourselves from this sense of inferiority. And so in honor of that effort, I wanted one of my friends and brothers, longtime partner here with us at Mount Airy. He and his father have come for our Ma'afa commemorations. They both have blessed us in so many ways. Dr. Smalls has also come for our couples ministry several years ago when I had a little bit more hair. So I'm just thankful and grateful that on a Saturday evening at 6 p.m., preachers know that's a time you don't mess with preachers, right? After that. So I'm thankful for our friendship, for our brother, to just count it not robbery to come and share with us in this series of presentations. He is well qualified, my brother from Jersey. I was able to be blessed to share with him while he was both in Inglewood, New Jersey, and now at the New Calvary Baptist Church in Norfolk, Virginia. He's been there 10 years, doing a phenomenal job, lectures, preaches all over this land, particularly before COVID, and now is on Zoom all over the place. And so I'm thankful and grateful sincerely for him taking the time to be with us, to share with us around our theme, faith and family, and in particular, this session that we're going to be dealing with is multiple generations of trauma and how they impact the family. He's well qualified. He's a marriage and family counselor, in addition to being a great pastor and preacher. And so I wanted him, Mount Airy, you are the best, and I want to provide you the best service wherever it may be found. So without any further ado, brothers and sisters, let's receive again our dear friend and brother, the Reverend Dr. William Marcus Smalls.
Thank you. And to all of you, we say namaste. We say God bless you. We say the Lord is in this space, and we are grateful for the honor and the privilege that is ours. Without question, Mount Airy, I do not have to tell you that you have one of the most awesome pastors. If I was going to use poor English, he is one of the awesomest pastors we have in our area and our time, and we're grateful for his ability, his gift, and his willingness to share and continue to keep us in this moment. I got to say all that again. I froze. Did I freeze? I got to say all that again.
We got you down. We got you down.
Okay. All right. Yeah. He is an awesome pastor, and he has blessed and literally at times saved my ministry life. I've been grateful for him and his gift to share and to pour out. And I don't have to tell you, Mount Airy, you are incredibly, immensely blessed from this awesome pastor. Like I said before, he is the awesomest pastor that we know in this season. And so we're grateful for him. I am excited about what you all are doing as we continue to talk about how we free our minds in a liberation context, and how we emancipate ourselves emotionally. I like how that was put. One of my favorite artists, Bob Marley, in his redemption song says, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. And so it is essential and important for us to recognize the need to do the self-work of healing that is required. I am, immensely grateful to the Monterey family that has always been kind to me and has been the place that introduced me to the Ma'afa. You need to know that you are parents of the Ma'afa program that we do at New Calvary, that your pastor has been kind enough to come and share with us with. So your ministry, Monterey, has been a blessing, a tremendous blessing to me personally. And it's been a blessing to the churches in plural, the two churches I have served. My assignment tonight is to share and talk about family trauma and what that means and how we understand it. And so we're going to talk from this idea. Might be a little earth-shattering in the title, but hopefully you'll understand it as we come around. But we're going to talk about my family is in my way. And we don't say that in a mean sense, but we say it in the sense of understanding what the family dynamic means to our progress personally, and how we understand the intricate connection of our family and what our family dynamic and our family type. So tonight we're going to talk about understanding the effects of family trauma and how we begin teaching ourselves how to heal. And we're going to talk about that and move through that. And so Romans, if we put that, your awesome video team, if we can start putting that PowerPoint up for you guys to see this. So we're going to understand the effects of family trauma and how we begin teaching ourselves how to heal. Romans 16:17 says, I urge you, brothers and sisters, to keep an eye on those who cause dissensions and offenses in opposition to the teaching that you have learned, and to avoid them. So that does have a lot to do with the influences we have and how we protect ourselves from those influences and how we shield ourselves. One of the things we need to understand is that we don't remove ourselves. And as much as we try, we cannot separate ourselves from where we come from. We cannot separate ourselves from a family systems perspective. We can't separate ourselves from family, but we have to understand how we then begin to individuate and heal ourselves and move forward as individuals, despite some of the family systems that we have. So let's look at this thing as we move forward. Let's talk about what is trauma. What is trauma? Okay, and it says right there for you, that is, trauma is the experience of extreme psychological distress, right? It's an emotional injury that takes place and affects the thinking process of the brain, right? And so I liken that to if you have a car accident, or if you skydive, or if you're walking across the street and get hit by a bike or a motorcycle, that what happens is that's a trauma to your body, right? That when you go to the hospital, to the ER, most of the times that's done because you go to the ER because there's a physical trauma, right? That's why you go to the trauma center, right? There's something that brings distress to your physical body. Well, trauma from a psychological perspective is when we find ourselves emotionally damaged, when there's an event that emotionally damages us or creates some type of friction or some type of discomfort. Here's the thing about emotional trauma. Emotional trauma affects us. And what happens is, and why it becomes so crazy, is because emotional trauma hits us and can stop our development in certain places. And so what happens is when we experience this particular trauma, we end up actually dwarfing our continued development in some places and some things, because the trauma event freezes us from growing because of what has happened and what takes place in terms of the experience. So long-term reactions to trauma can be unpredictable emotions, meaning you're erratic, you're up and down, situations that bother you, flashbacks that we have, strained relationships being hard to maintain or express ourselves about what it is we need or how it is we feel. We get trained for certain things, headaches, nausea, that because all of this, there's a wonderful book called The Body Keeps the Score. And it talks about how trauma from the emotional side affects us physically, that it ultimately manifests itself. So when we talk about how we overeat, so when we talk about, things that we do to ourselves, we've heard of people who cut themselves. We heard of people who maybe drink too much or do certain things that create self-bodily harm, right? That happen to the biological, to the physical aspect of who we are. And we all know, and we have come to know what stress does to us, right, in our lives, and how stress affects us, and how stress connects to hypertension, high blood pressure, all those other kinds of things. And so we find ourselves in those particular places. So they're long-term reactions, even if it's something that happened a long time ago. Even if it's something that happened a while ago, even if it's something that seems like we claim to be over or to be done with or to be finished, it does still and can still manifest itself in our body, in our behavior, in our thinking, to be sure, and how we process certain things. So, as an example, if we are victims, or if we are those who have grown up in households where physical violence is taking place, domestic violence is taking place, we can have moved out of the house, but certain behaviors, certain language, right, certain actions, certain sudden reactions, or certain moves can create certain trauma in our reactions and how we think and how we process. And so trauma is constant, and it speaks to the long-term effects that can really speak to our own situations in particular. All right. So let's talk about the reality of trauma and what it does. We talk about, okay, let's look at family trauma first. Okay, so family trauma is a frightening, often life-threatening issue, right? Violent events, whatever that means, that can happen to specific members of the family. All right. So trauma cause a traumatic stress that if family members create consequences that ripple, like just what we finished talking about. So what it does is actually it impedes on the ability for the family to function. Right? There's a phrase that they talk about in family systems theory of being systemic. Right? And when something is systemic, it means it affects everything else. Right? And so, an example, people, those of you who are on this right now, know just what I'm talking about, how something is systemic. You can be at work, right? And somebody walks in and they had a bad morning, or the boss walks in and everybody knows that they're a bully or they're messed up. Everybody can be laughing and joking and things feel real good, right? And then the boss walks in and everybody's attitude changes, right? That's a systemic effect. That's something that affects systemic, right? That a different energy or a different presence affects the whole system. And so in systemic thinking and in systemic operation, it continues to go on even in the family, right? So what happens to a sibling, what happens to the mother, right? All of those things that happens to a dad all can continue to be systemic. When a loved one passes away, when a grandparent or a parent passes away, what it does is it creates an uprising and a confusion in the system, because the system has to relearn how it's going to function and what it's going to do, right? Who's going to take that responsibility? Who's going to replace? Who's going to do those assignments? Who's going to be that person everybody runs to? Who's going to be that person that takes all the complaints or listens to all of those kinds of things? And so that system begins to wrestle with a sense of normalcy, with a sense of how it's going to come back to a sense of maintaining a sense of stability. And so when a trauma happens or trauma intercedes the situation, it ultimately creates ripple, right? And it infects family functioning. So what happens is we get to places where we look dysfunctional, right? So there is a problem or a particular issue that is taking place, but we work hard to cover it up, right? And so we work hard to cover it, so we're actually dysfunctional because we're trying to make sure everything looks like it's okay, when emotionally everything is all over the place and everything is chaotic. And any of you who have kept a top on a pot, a cover on a pot too long, knows that when that thing boils, if there's nowhere else to go, it's going to explode. And so what we need to understand is that the reason why people struggle or people find themselves in these places of tension is because they're living oftentimes in places of dysfunction, but they have not either had the room or have not been familiar with how to express those things or be set free from them. Okay. So what makes trauma so debilitating is that it can affect a person's sense of self, a person's sense of worth, a person's sense of the worldview, and ultimately a person's future, right? Because if I don't believe in myself, if I've been told from my parents, or for instance, if I've got critical parents, right, and this can be a prevalent thing. If I've got critical parents, that everything I do, right, there's criticism. Right. If I get a B, somebody says, well, why didn't you get the A? Right. Or if I was, in a race and I got third place, it's like, yo, well, you need to work harder to get first or second. And if I feel like I'm constantly being criticized and I'm not good enough, I can carry those things into my adulthood. And so I begin to look for places and people to accept me just for who I am, even if they're detrimental to my well-being. Right. So I will begin to connect with people just to affirm me or just to feel better, right? Even if they're not in my corner, or I will turn and draw to people who represent or who remind me of my parents because I'm constantly trying to get that approval. I'm constantly trying to get the okay. I'm constantly trying to be told that I'm okay and a good job, right? And so the whole idea of what it is to individuate and to be an individual becomes essential to our growth and our development. So let's move real quick. So let's talk about the reality of trauma. So trauma happens to everybody. So let's get this out the way. It's not that your family, it's happening just to your family or it's going on just in your life. So trauma happens to everyone. 61% of men will experience trauma in their lives and 51% of women will experience trauma. But what studies have shown is that 8% of men develop effects from their trauma, whereas 20% of women develop effects from the trauma they experience. Right? And so what we're saying is that it appears that, according to study and research, that women hold on to trauma longer or in different ways than men hold on to trauma. Okay. And stress becomes one of those things. So stress is the idea of feeling emotional strain or pressure, and it can manifest itself in psychological pain. So positive stresses can motivate, it can push athletes, it can make people dig deeper, right? It can make people try. Positive stress is what makes LeBron James who he is, what makes Michael Jordan who he is, what makes Tiger Woods who he is, makes Muhammad Ali who he is, right? But constant stress that is not reinforced in a positive way can create and that's constantly activated, can be ultimately traumatic, where it goes inward. I don't express it outward and try to improve, but it ultimately goes inward, and it creates different kinds of ideas or different kinds of hangups or different kinds of problems for me later on. So let's go to the next one. So what are the lasting effects on family trauma, right? So trauma affects the family because by origin, families are systemic, like we talked about. And so we learn, everybody needs to know who's watching this, we learn how to be in relationship, we learn how to handle problems, we learn how to be friends, we learn how to be husbands and wives, we learn how to be parents, we learn all of that subconsciously from our family of origin. The family we're in, we learn how to do all of that, whether or not it's our family, a mother and father dynamic, whether or not we were raised by a single parent, whether or not we raised the relationship of influence as a grandparent relationship, grandparents or aunts and uncles. We learn how to be in relationship from the relationships we see. We learn how to dialogue and interact with people based upon the relationships we see. My mother used to say, my mother was a special education school in the city of Newark, New Jersey. And she would say, it was systemic, it's a systemic situation. You're talking to the kid talking about what they ain't gonna do, how they ain't gonna do it, they ain't listening, this, that, and the third. And then you call the parent in for a parent conversation, and the parent talking about what you telling them they ain't gonna do, how this ain't gonna work, right? You say you understand the child is learning, right, from the parent, right? And it all comes from a place of trauma, right? It all comes from a place of shame. It all comes from a place of fear of not knowing. There's a whole lot of different reasons that happens. But the reality is the behavior is learned because it's from a systemic place. I mentioned in my book that it was a couple that very interesting dynamic. And I'm going to say this real quick. I had a couple in when I was pastoring in Jersey, and I ran into a couple. And what happened was the woman in the relationship, the wife, grew up watching her parents fight. And when I mean fight, like box in the street, like punch each other, like fight. Grew up watching her parents fight. And the husband had the same situation where it was an abusive relationship, but his mother told him one day when he was growing up, never put your hands on a woman. She said, never abuse a woman and put your hands on a woman. We're talking about what happens with trauma and how it follows us. So what happened with the wife was the wife would constantly go after the husband because that's what love looked like. She would engage in argument. She'd call him names. She'd go after him over and over again because when he would come back at her, in her mind, that's what relationship was. That's what love was. That's what this was supposed to look like. But in the husband's mind, the husband was like listening to his mom. He heard them, don't ever fight, don't ever argue, don't ever get into it with a woman. And so when she would come at him, he would pull back. And the more he pulled back, she would come at him. And if he would pull back, she would come at him until he had no other choice but to blow up. And she felt like she was in their element. And so all I'm saying is the legacies of what we've been taught, even in a subconscious place, affect us to the place where we need to understand that we respond to everything that has happened in our families of origin. We respond to it all and we understand it. And, and it can become detrimental if we don't understand it and get ahead of it. All right. So the essence, we can experience a traumatic events and reproduce that event in some ways. We try to reduce it, right? Not only in our lives, but in the lives of our family. We try to fix it. We try to correct it. We begin to live out those traumatic experiences in our family. And many times we do it in an unconscious way. All right, so let's look at the next slide real quick, because this is important. Those of you who are fans like me, I don't even know if y'all get down with Lovecraft like that, but y'all need to watch Lovecraft.
Yes, sir, I'm a believer.
Oh my God, it is an unbelievable, the level on, and the writing is phenomenal in that thing. Sister Alicia does her thing in that. But anyway, we see, in case you all do not watch it, you are looking at Montrose Freeman. Montrose Freeman is the father, as we understand it in the storyline so far. He is the father of Atticus, otherwise known as Tick Freeman, right? Tick is the guy he's looking at. Montrose, played by Michael K. Williams. Michael K. Williams does a phenomenal job, but Montrose is tortured, right, in his development and his relationship with his son. Montrose, Tick has said constantly that he has been beaten, he has been abused, he has been knocked over by his father for a whole host of reasons. But last week's episode, not to blow it up, but we understand why Montrose is the way he is, because Montrose goes back in his past and gets beat on the front of his house in the grass by his father for a whole lot of reasons. And his father's got a whole lot of issues that he pours out into Montrose. Montrose pours all of those things out in his own frustrations out on Tick. So the systemic piece of how all of this happens continues to play out. Now, that does not mean everybody who's been abused turns into an abuser. That's not what we're saying. Everybody manifested in different ways. But I think this is a good understanding and a clear indication of what happens to us when we go through traumatic events. Montrose, as a father, cannot articulate relationship and connection with his son and can only do it the way he's been exposed. And that is to beat, that is to be violent, that is to be over excessive. And so as a result of it, when we look at the storyline, we see that the same thing happened to him. So they're difficult places when trauma hits, well, we ultimately live that out. We manifest that stuff. If we don't have places of affection, right? When we don't have places of affection, when somebody says, hey, well, why don't you give your son a hug? Or why don't you give your daughter a hug? They'll be all right. Nobody hugged me when I was growing up. They'll be fine. You know what I'm saying? Those kinds of things we manifest without even thinking about it, because that's what we've been taught, right? Blasting boxing game has a wonderful book. I'm sure your pastor told you about it, called Slave Community. And in the book Slave Community, he talks about the different slave dynamics that have affected us overall. And we're going to talk about that really, really quick in just a few minutes. So let's talk about the difficult places where trauma lives. Let's go to the next one. So trauma is revealed in many different ways. That in the family system, it's dynamic, right? And it's often revealed in ways of abuse. It's through neglect or self or physical harm. So when we say neglect, neglect is a form of abuse, meaning avoiding or unable to connect with family members. So neglect means to also be emotionally unavailable, right? My dad never told me he was proud of me. You know, my dad never hugged me. You know, my father, you know, said life is hard. You know, that's just what it is, right? And all of that comes from a trauma that he got to deal with. That's from another kind of line, right? Physical harm, or physical harm is another way, demonstrating anger or another on another in physical form, right? So to physically put ourselves together. All right. So the next slide says that the difficult places where trauma lives in different forms of abuse. So they can be physical, they can be sexual, they can be verbal or emotional. And sexual abuse, you know, is not just molestation. Sexual abuse can be body shaming as well. That can be, you know, talking about body shaming. I regretfully, I had to check somebody. I remember when I was a pastor in Jersey, and I had to check somebody. They were like, you know, my daughter, yeah, you know, the heavyset girl, the real fat girl. I said, oh, dude, you can't do that. I said, if you're saying that to me, what on earth are you saying to her? You know what I mean? And you know, we have, you know, to have those kinds of ideas of talking about physical shame. So verbal, you know, you ain't nothing, ain't never been nothing, ain't gonna amount to nothing. You know, you just like fatty people, you just like your mom and them. You know, all of those kinds of things. I can't believe you're so stupid. I can't believe that. Why would you do that? Dummy, simple. Those kinds of verbal, emotional things, and muscle manipulation, you know, muscling you, you know, promising you they're going to do stuff and then taking it away from you, saying they're going to do something and not doing it. Those kinds of emotional roller coasters. The mental and psychological stuff that goes on with feeling and esteem. Financial, right? We don't talk about that a lot, but the financial and economic withholding, right? You know, make your own money. You know what I'm saying? Do your own thing. You know, now you know you want those sneakers. You know, you 7 years old, save up for them. Yo, I'm 10. I'm gonna save up for some sneakers. I'm 10 years old. You know what I mean? And there's nothing. And I'm not saying they're not lessons in talking about how you save money, how you understand those kinds of things, but those kinds of pressures, right, that get put on us as individuals. And culture, what now we also have to recognize is culture and identity. So we're talking about, you know, gender abuse and things of that nature, which happens in Lovecraft, you know, that, you know, without telling you are what his father's afraid of. You know, we live in that world where, you know, we think, you know, people can, you know, get it beat out of them, or, you know, regeneration therapy and all these other kind of madnesses and all this other kind of stuff. But to talk about those kinds of places as traumas that we deal with on a regular basis and that different kinds of people can deal with. And all of us in some way, shape, or form have experienced these, maybe not with our families, but we've experienced them. We've experienced them at school. We've experienced them with different groups. We've experienced them in college. We've experienced them, you know, in the different avenues in work, in our workplaces, and different kinds of things. So let's take a look real quick at the next slide. And this is important. And this is where your boy, me and your pastor, we really connect, because you cannot remove culture from the traumatic experience, particularly when you're talking about African Americans. So let's go to the next slide. So we have to talk about the trauma that is created around us. Okay. I do some work. Very quickly. I do some work at a jail in the area. I do some work at a jail in the area for mental health. I do some mental health work as a mental health counselor. One of the classes, it wasn't even my class. I was doing some work and somebody was teaching a class, and they were doing a class on substance abuse. And what they said was they were trying to create stress in mice so that they could see how their brains functioned and operated. And what they said in the movie, it wasn't even my business. I was doing something else, I promise y'all. But it came to me. It said what they did was they created an environment that was stressful. So what they did was they put the floor that the mice lived in on a slant, so that they had to constantly climb to stay balanced. Right? Don't miss my teaching. Right? The floor was on was on a slant. The floor was on a slant, so they had to always negotiate and maneuver their environment. Their conditions were stressful.
Yeah.
And what they did with the mice is they gave them wet pellets instead of dry pellets, which created a different kind of reaction to them. So their conditions weren't good. And the third thing they did was they separated the mice. So they kept them from connecting and interacting with each other to create stress. They did it to create stress. Don't miss this. So their environment was messed up, their conditions were messed up, and they gave them lack of connection to induce stress. It was done to induce stress. So what I'm saying to y'all, some of y'all who might miss me, we talking about Black folk when we look at their environment, right? That is stressful. If we look at their conditions, are stressful. If we talk about the lack of connection to the point where I go after you because you in a different hood, or you in a different gang, or my parents don't connect, or I ain't got no grandparents, or the teacher don't connect. So my lack of connection, all of that induces stress. And we need to understand that it induces a traumatic experience for us. So we cannot minimize the culture that we're a part of. Your pastor has told you over and over and over again, I'm sure, right, that slavery was a traumatic experience. And what is happening in the traumatic experience, that's why we have Ma'afas. That's why we do the Ma'afa projects and the Ma'afa experiences. Because what we do is we have to understand the beginning of some of the traumas we have. Right? Some of the family stuff we have to acknowledge comes out of the slavery context. It comes out of our slavery context and how we engage and how we dialogue. We need to understand that the culture helped to create and perpetuate much stress. Much of the stress for some of us who have parents or who have grandparents, who have families that aren't as warm or maybe rigid or aren't necessarily warm and connecting, right? Understanding that some of that does come from some people who had some horrible experiences dealing with race, dealing with being enslaved, and understanding how that stuff got passed down. And so we need to understand that trauma gets created around us as well. And that even in our story, even in our history, we can perpetuate some of that stuff. All right. So let's look at the effects of trauma real quick. Effects of trauma operate this way. So the most evident examples of experienced and expressed trauma for most evident are anxiety. Folk always worried, concerned, everything's falling apart. Folks are nervous constantly. Folks have problems with trust. Folks, who have problems letting people in or strangers, and if we tell the truth about it, that's our people. You know what I mean? Who that? You know what I'm saying? They can just close up in the house, you're just like, who that? You know what I'm saying? We don't understand, we're doing it. That's what we do, right? Obsessive compulsive behavior, right? That's a part of it. Because what we do, people with OCD behaviors, because it's all about, that becomes about control, right? Because I try to maintain control, because if I feel out of control, right, it brings me different places. So I want to stay in control. So I want to make sure that everything's clean. I want to make sure everything is in order. I want to make sure, right now they drive everybody else crazy in the process, but understanding that OCD is about maintaining a level of control, because out of control brings me anxiety and causes me different feeling. Depression is always, dealing with the esteem, which can become ultimately biological, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Understanding PTSD to where we are responding constantly, and living out of the traumas of our lives, right? So, they used to call it in the military, they used to call it being shell shocked, right? But now they understand what it is. Like PTSD, right? Somebody comes back and you see death, you see people get blown up, you see people get killed. It's kind of hard to get a good night's sleep, and rest when all of that kind of stuff is going on in your life. You have a hard time getting a good night's sleep when you got a big meeting the next morning. You have a hard time getting a good night's sleep after you had an argument with your husband or your wife, or you're going to your boss for a meeting or something that's going to happen in the morning that's going to be influential. That you got a hard time doing that. Imagine somebody who had, traumatic experience in terms of warfare or, particular kinds of things. And so those things stay with us. Those things stay on our mind. Okay. So next slide talks about these effects continuing, right? Nightmares, right? Okay. We have nightmares, avoidance of traumatic reminders. So people, not people who are recluse necessarily, or who are introverts necessarily, but folks who have an extreme sense of withdrawal. They're socially awkward. They don't connect with people. They withdraw from events and places, don't want to go places, don't want to do things, don't want to interact with people. They're irritable, their irritability and anger, folks who are angry constantly, folks who have a level of anger, who seem like they're always unhappy. We don't have those in church.
Yeah.
We have them here in New Calvary.
Maybe not there, but up here, yeah. Up here we do that.
Right. I mean, we do that, right? Those people who say, why they always mean? They mean in the meeting, and they mean at worship. They can't, and there's no place, irritability and anger, right? There's some places that haven't worked out. Loss of interest in pleasurable activities, right? They don't want to do anything fun. They don't want to do anything interesting. Don't want to do anything in a collective. Difficulty sleeping, feelings of guilt and shame. Brene Brown has a book right now called "I Thought It Was Me, But It Isn't." If anybody could catch that, it's a really good read talking about shame and how we handle that. Ed Wimberly has a good book, Moving from Shame to Self-Worth. That's a real important piece. Disrupted relationships, people who can't function in relationship well, constantly arguing, constantly bickering. They don't, things don't go their way. They want to quit. They want to walk away. Decreased interest in sex, right? Sexual connection, because that's all about intimacy and connection and being intimate, being vulnerable. That becomes difficult for people to do. And impaired concentration, right? It's hard to think, hard to process, hard to keep a thought in my head, hard to operate in that way. All right, so let's look at these two videos, and I want y'all to just process these real quick. And if you got questions later on, we'll bring those up. So let's look at this first video. This first video is from Fence. They're both from Fences, but I want to make a comparison after we watch both of them. So let's watch these videos. Oh, hold on, sidebar. The videos I'm going to show you, I know y'all are saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Ghost, but all of them may have some language in it that may be a little bit not churchy. I believe everybody's
that
grown.
They just said the other night or the other day. Yeah, okay, got you.
Right. Everybody's grown. Everybody's an adult, and we're not gonna act like we ain't heard this language before. Just because you're hearing it don't mean you got to use it. But we're using it as good teaching points for this lesson. Okay, so that's the caveat. I told my brother they was in there. He gave me the thumbs up, so we wrote. All right, so let's make this. Here we go.
Can I ask you a question?
The hell you got to ask me, Mr. Stewicki, the one you got the questions for.
How come you ain't never liked me?
Like you? Who the hell said I got to like you? What law is there say I got to like you? Want to stand up in front of my face and ask a damn fool-ass question like that? Talking about liking somebody. Come here, boy, when I talk to you. Straighten up, goddammit. I asked you a question. What law is there say I got to like you?
None.
All right, then. Don't you eat every day? Answer me when I talk to you. Don't you eat every day?
Yeah.
Nigga, as long as you in my house, you put a sir on the end of it when you talk to me.
Yes, sir.
You eat every day.
Yes, sir.
Got a roof over your head.
Yes, sir.
Got clothes on your back.
Yes, sir.
Why you think that is?
Because of you?
Hell, I know it's because of me, but why do you think that is?
Because you like me?
Like you. I go out of here every morning. I bust my butt putting up with them crackers every day because I like you. You're about the biggest fool I ever saw. It's my job. It's my responsibility. A man is supposed to take care of his family. You live in my house, fill your belly with my food, put your behind on my bed because you're my son. Because I like you, because it's my duty to take care of you. I owe a responsibility to you. Now let's get this straight right here and now before I go along any further. I ain't got to like you. Mr. Rand don't give me my money come payday because he like me. He give it to me because he owe me. Now I don't give you everything I got to give you. I give you your life. Me and your mama worked that out between us, and liking your black ass wasn't part of the bargain. Now, don't you go through life worrying about whether somebody like you or not. You best be making sure they're doing right by you. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Then get the hell out of my face and get on down to that A&P.
All right, so let's watch the next one.
Had this old mule called Gray Boy. My daddy sent me out to do some plowing. I got to fooling around with Joe Canewell's daughter. Found us a nice spot. Got real cozy with each other. She about 13, so we didn't figure we grown anyway. So we down there by the creek enjoying ourselves. Ain't thinking about nothing. Didn't know Gray Boy had gotten loose, wandered back to the house, and my daddy was looking for me. So we down there enjoying ourselves when he come up on us. Surprised us. Had them leather straps off that mule, commenced to whooping me like there was no tomorrow. I jump up, I'm mad, embarrassed. I was scared of my daddy. Now, when he commenced to whipping on me, quite naturally, I run to get out the way. Now, I think he mad because I ain't done my work. But I see where he chasing me off so he can have the gal for himself. When I see what the matter of it was, I lost all fear of my daddy, and right there I became a man, 14 years of age. Now it's my turn to run him off. I picked up them same reins he used on me. I picked up them reins. I commenced whooping on him. Gal jump up, she run off. When he turned to face me, I knew why the devil never come and get him, because he was the devil himself. I don't know what happened. I woke up laying there by the creek and blew this old dog we had. He was licking my face. Both my eyes was swole shut. I thought I was blind. I couldn't see nothing. I just laid there and cried. And didn't know what I was going to do. But I knew time had come for me to leave my daddy's house. And suddenly the world got big. It was a long time before I could cut it down the way I could handle it.
Okay, so thank you for that. All right, so when we're looking at the connection of trauma, right? I showed you Troy and Corey first to see that relationship, right? When we talk about trauma, there was emotional cutoff, right? Troy does not give emotion, right? Now, there's a lot of lessons that we can unpack in that scene, but for our family understanding of what trauma is, Corey's looking for connection, and Troy just can't give it to him. But we see through the second video why he can't, because his father was unable to give it to him. His father was unable to give him emotional connection. One of the things that's powerful that this clip doesn't show, like for this, if any of you have seen Fences, Troy, Denzel Washington playing Troy, says, I hope he's dead, talking about his father. He says, I hope he's dead. That way he could have some peace, right? How powerful that is, right? Because he understood that his father had no peace. His father had no sense of calm or relaxation or sense of joy in his life for a whole host of reasons that we can only guess, right? But that gets transferred. And because of all of the things that happened in Troy's life, you know, because in that scene, he talks about being in jail, talks about playing with the Negro Leagues, but that never materializing for him. There's a whole lot of things in his life that have disappointed him that he now takes out on Corey and wants, and he wants, it's not that he doesn't want good for his son, but he just goes about it in the wrong way, right? That trauma, he can't process it correctly, and he can't process it, but he wants the right thing, he just can't do it in the right way. And so a lot of us, we understand that we have experienced those kinds of things. You know, for some of us, we watching that, we like, oh, you know, that's just a dad talking to his son. But but if we look at what the son really wants, he wants this connection, he wants this relationship, and he's concerned that his father doesn't like him, right? And he's concerned that his father doesn't like him, And Troy says that at 14, he knew he had to leave his father's house. How traumatic is that? Right? And we understand these dynamics of trauma that, people go through in their face, right? And then he becomes a parent. Right, he ain't had no good model of what it is to be a father. He had no good model to show him how to man up and do certain things because he left at 14. So then what he does is, because there's not been any models to correct it, what he does is he simply repeats the same kind. Right, and so when we understand our histories, and a lot of times what we do in our histories is we convince ourselves that they're okay or that they're normal. Right, that's the dysfunction idea. And so we kind of say, well, we're all right. We kind of say, it ain't that big a deal. It happened to everybody, right? But without talking about where it hurts us and where it breaks us down. So let's look at the next slide real quick. We're gonna give you some tips in this stuff. So we're gonna put the fun in dysfunctional tonight, y'all. We're gonna put the fun in dysfunctional.
Put it on us, Doctor. Put us on.
We're gonna talk about toxic family behavior, understanding how you may know if your family might be a little toxic, right? How you recognize if your family behavior is a little toxic.
Doctors, we can't hear you.
Oh, y'all can't hear me?
Yeah, we got you now.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna put the fun and dysfunction tonight, and we're gonna come to understand what recognizing some abusive and some toxic behaviors that might be unhealthy, right? Number one is cruel and critical remarks. Constant criticism about relationship status, mental or physical health, financial career challenges are used to control and create an atmosphere of shame. Okay, so well, who you seeing now? Who you dating now? They good. Families are good for talking about, who loose, particularly men, they're good for that with men. He ain't nothing but old hoe. He ain't nothing but a dog. Be careful. You know what I mean? And you're hearing that kind of stuff, those kind of critical remarks, those kinds of things that we go through. What's wrong with you? Every time I see you, you're getting bigger. I had an aunt who used to say she'd go home to be with the Lord. She saw me one of the family reunion one time. She looked at me, she turned her face, she said, "How big you gonna get?" You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just like, those things can be traumatic, right?
Yeah.
So we talk those things up. Financial, you ain't never been able to hold down a job. They ain't never been able to work. I don't know what's wrong with you. Those kinds of things. And what they're often used for is to control the atmosphere of shame. So watch this. So people don't leave, right? You shame people because you don't want them to leave. You shame them because you don't want them to improve. Because if they improve, then they might leave you, right? So if that becomes one of those things, and it becomes a thing of control, right? So we don't shame because when we shame, you might get better than me, and then that causes me to feel bad. The next one is pitting against one another to get a rise, right? When the atmosphere is like Jerry Springer, when you got a Jerry Springer atmosphere in your house, somebody says, well, why can't you be more like your brother? Why, your sister doing it, why can't you do it, right? Inciting drama and conflict, making family members jealous or resentful, right? Going out, where you coming from? Or, where y'all coming back? Yeah, well, I bought, her a new dress. I ain't getting no new dress. Well, you wasn't there. You should have been there, right? So now I'm mad at my sister. She got a dress. You could have bought me a dress. You knew what size I wear, even if I wasn't there. You know what I mean? Those kinds of things and those kind of partnerings and those kinds of ideas that go up that can create resentment and division, right? So let's go to the next one. Silent treatment, right? Some of y'all still do this in your marriages. Y'all don't have to say amen. I know I'm teaching. The absence of speaking, right? For hours or for days. But think about what that does to a young person. To a youth. Now, some of us say, oh my God, I never do that. But the passive aggressive ways of shutting people out, right? Silence to have individuals wonder what's wrong or what have I done, right? You're walking around saying, well, what's wrong with you? Nothing. Or what did I do? No, everything's fine. Those kinds of things. That silent treatment that can be, psychologically torturing, particularly for young people, if you let it be, right? Or if I do something and my parent demonstrates that they're mad at me and they don't talk to me for a while, those kinds of things can be devastating. Your business, we good for this in our community. Your business becomes everybody else's business. Your mother talking to your grandmother. I had to beat them yesterday because I called them one of them girly magazines. Ma, I don't need everybody in the street. And every time you go somewhere, they keep telling your story, right? Things that share privately become public with added critique, right? So you can talk about certain things, or you can share certain things with your parents, or share certain things with loved ones in your family, and then they breach a level of confidence by sharing it with somebody with critique. Well, you know, he told me this, that, and the third, and you know, but the truth is he brought it on himself. He did, you know, those kinds of things that create, you know, those kinds of feelings of, you know, of distress and not feeling confident about yourself. Let's go to the next one. Toxic siblings, right? Siblings that or parents decide with parents to manipulate a situation to win favor or align with a particular parent. Okay, so we're gonna make sure that we understand these dynamics. Don't repeat these patterns with new people or with different people. So this next slide I'm going to show you. This next video I'm going to show you. I'm going to set it up a little bit. We can move it. This next video is from the movie called The Fighter, Mark Wahlberg and Christian Bale. Christian Bale is, the story's about Mickey Ward. Those of you who watch fighting, boxing up that way, y'all know Mickey Ward well. Mickey Ward with the great fights with Arturo Gatti back in the 90s. But his brother, Freddie, fought Sugar Ray Leonard and became his trainer. But Freddie was a drug addict and became a drug addict and became unreliable. And his mother was his manager. Now, this Ward family puts the fun in dysfunction. And the mother, who was his manager, was really kind of exploiting Mickey Ward and ultimately always wanted Freddie to be his trainer. And he knew Mickey had to individuate, meaning he had to separate himself from his family if he wanted to be successful. But in this moment, he is confronting his mother, who has pitted his brother against him. And so let's look at this real quick and see what we can see.
Dick Echo and Pride alone.
Watching that for years, huh? Oh, hey! What the hell are you doing? Mickey! Wow. Take that baby out of here. I told you, take him away 10 minutes ago. Sweetheart, you all right? You okay? You back? You all right? What are you doing? What's the matter with you?
This be my fight, Alice? Huh? Just once? Maybe just this one time, not for Dickie? Huh? I know you think he's coming back. He's 40 years old. He doesn't have a tooth in his head that's his fucking own. Little fucking 10 rounds.
Let your brother talk for a minute here, all right? What are you saying, sweetheart? What are you saying?
Shut up before I bust your fucking head open, Dickie.
Dickie, come on. Hey.
What are you gonna do? Dickie, come on. I'm Shane Come on. You want me to bust your fucking
Hey,
head open?
come on, George, please.
Dickie.
Please. What are you saying, sweetheart? Tell me what you're saying.
This is supposed to be my fight. This is my shot at the
It is
title.
your
I won't
fight.
get another one after this. Am I being selfish? No. Am I saying Mickey? You know what? If I am, I'm sorry. I thought I was fighting for the championship, and I thought you were my mother, too.
I am your mother.
Yeah.
Nick, I'm sorry. I had no idea you felt like that, all right? If I made mistakes, I'm gonna be better. I don't want to hurt you. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
Stay with him. Dickie.
Okay, so what we see in what we're seeing is the culmination of a moment. Over and over and over again, Alice, their mother, has gone to Dickie and kind of made excuses for him and tried to help him out over and over. And she wants him to even train him, right? But Mickey Ward knows that he can't do that anymore. And he is tired of Alice making excuses and pitting and guilting him to use his brother. And so that becomes the breaking point where he's like, yo, listen. And it's a crossroads, because what happened? Dickie gets upset and leaves out, right? Well, he's no longer the center of attention, right? He's no longer having all the attention come on him, right? He can't handle it and he pulls out. So, a lot of times that sibling thing, with parents can do that. And a lot of times we, as parents, I can speak to this, as parents, we think one isn't as strong as something with the other. And so we try to overcompensate and help out. And it can actually create friction. And that becomes a very different kind of thing because children begin to feel, or young people begin to feel a certain way. And then it begins to manifest itself in later places. All right. So we talked about this, but what our assignment is we have to make sure that we don't do this with the new people we meet, that we don't repeat these patterns, that we don't do this stuff with everybody we meet. We have to be conscious enough to really kind of heal and restore ourselves from those particular places. So let's real quick move to this next one. All right, so here it is. How do we heal and protect ourselves from family trauma? I'm gonna try to do this in 10 quick minutes. One, reality. Here's a reality, everybody in Mount Airy and who's watching in TV world and Video Zoom world. You cannot change other people's behavior. I don't care how much you think you can, build a bridge and get over it. You cannot do it. You cannot change other people's behavior. People come in to me all the time. They say, Dr. Small, this is broken. I say, this is broken. I need you to fix this. I need you to work this out. I need you to hammer this out. If they would just do this, if they would just do this, if they would just do this, I got news for you. The only person you can change is yourself. The only person you can change is how you respond to the stuff that's happening. So you cannot change anybody else's behavior. You got to understand that it's not about changing somebody else. It's about understanding how you change and how you make the adjustments. Reality number two, the skill becomes working on how you react to other people's behavior. So it ain't about other people changing. If people never change, what is it you do? Pastors have had to learn this very, very quickly. It's not about what somebody else does. It's about how
yes, sir.
React to other people's
You preaching.
The unfortunate reality is that some people, even family members, can be emotionally unsafe. Even some family members, some people we love, they can be emotionally unsafe. They make us feel a certain way about ourselves. They make us feel bad. They make us feel like we can't accomplish. They make us second guess or whatever. Sometimes family can be emotionally unsafe. So how do we manage that? Individuals need to begin to establish what's called a detached contact. Detached contact means that you maintain a healthy distance from people who can be problematic for you. You're not Superman, you're not Superwoman, you're not impervious to comment or critique. Everybody has those places and different levels where they can handle that. So you have to find places of healthy distance, right? Matthew 18:17 says, if they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. If they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. We oftentimes misunderstand this text in the sense that it is not about casting somebody out. Jesus does not say hate the pagan or hate the tax collector. You treat them differently. There's still love, but there's love at a distance. I have to put you in the compartment to contextualize that thing, operate and function when I can. I'll put it to you like this. I had a friend who owned a snake. He had a pet snake when we were in college, Dr. Bennett. He had a pet snake in college, right? With the pet snake in college. And I'm a fan of snakes. I like snakes. I like them. I think they're cool, right? But what would happen was he'd take the snake out when company came over and we hold the snake. We put the snake around our neck. He'd go out to the campus. He'd go out to places with the snake or whatever. But when he was done with it, he put the snake back in its glass cage, put the cover on it, and put the rock on top of it so it couldn't come out. Y'all are missing what I'm saying. That he operated and did what he wanted to do with the snake, but when it was time for the snake to go into its place, that's where he put it. Sometimes we need to understand what healthy distance is. He didn't sleep with the snake. He didn't take showers with it. He didn't let it roam around the house. He put it where it needed to be. And a lot of times what we do is we hang out with the snake. We hang out with it and we deal with it, interact. The snake is all right, and I'm gonna put it in the bed, or then I'm gonna have it roll with me, and then it starts to say mean stuff, and then it starts to get toxic, and then we wonder why we feel miserable because you didn't put the snake back where it needed to go. You didn't put it in, compartmentalize it in its particular places. And so we need to understand that it's not about discounting it all out, but it's about being compartmentalizing it enough to know what it is we need to do. Let's go to the next one. So continuously recognize the psychological games that people have a tendency to play. There are some people who are psychologically manipulative. There are some people who are emotionally manipulative and they play those games. There are some people who come into the game 10 steps ahead because they know what they want, even when they're not saying it. right? So, but you have to refuse to engage in that kind of toxicity. Sometimes you're going to have to separate, and there's going to be a need for no contact, right? And that's the hard thing when it comes to family, right? That knowing what it is to emotionally separate. But you have to understand that you are emotionally separating for your own well-being. You have to understand you're emotionally separating for your own mental health, right? You have to recognize that I'm separating so that I can be healthy, right? And it doesn't mean I don't love them, but I cannot operate and function and give them what they want in terms of the nonsense. I got a frat brother, a line brother. He's my line brother, whom I love. We hang out. I love him to death. Early on, he's an antagonist. You know, he's the guy who will dig something and he'll come at you until you blow up at him. And what he would do is, one of our line brothers, he would go at him and pick with him and pick with him, pick with him, till he would literally chase him around the fraternity room. But when the frat brother who got mad would chase him around the fraternity room, the brother who was egging him on would laugh. He would laugh. He wasn't scared. It wasn't like he was looking for a fight. Because he had accomplished his goal. He had worked him up to that point. And so what you had to do with him when he would try to antagonize, when he would try to come at you, is you wouldn't entertain it. And when you wouldn't entertain it, he would leave it alone, right? But as long as you engaged, he would keep going. That's what I mean. Sometimes you have to operate in those places where you know what people are trying to do. You have to be prepared enough to emotionally cut that off to change the behavior. You're not going to change him. How do you change yourself, right? If things that are happening are beginning to affect your emotional well-being, if they're affecting your mental health, you need to talk about how you establish no contact. All right, or no contact and distance yourself in safe ways. Let's go to the next one real fast. Mood. If your mood changes when you think about an individual, right? If they're like literally, if you think about somebody, you spit, right? If you see a person or see a phone call from them and a sensation comes over you, right? When you see that caller ID number pop up and you go, Lord. Right? Whoever that is said, I know they're gonna have something to say. They're gonna challenge me on that. An atmosphere, or like we said earlier, the atmosphere changes when this person enters the room, right? Or you have increase in depression, right? That this person causes depression or anxiety or panic disorder, or just not just a person. Maybe it's your family setting. Maybe going to your family's house for Thanksgiving creates this stuff, right? Maybe you've not been around your family because this kind of stuff happens. Panic disorders, addictions, mood instability, you're erratic. Your spouse says, every time we go to your family house, you get all worked up and agitated and angry, right? Those kinds of things you want to look at. So let's look at this checklist, emotional wellness checklist, real quick. This is the last thing we're looking at. Well, you move me, baby. Go back.
There you go.
So family emotional wellness checklist, here it is. So what you want to ask yourself, number one, what is the source of your frustration, right? So I am angry, I am disappointed, I am sad, I am X because of what, right? Find the source of your frustration. I am sad because my family always picks on me every time I come around, right? Or I am frustrated because my family doesn't hear me when I'm trying to tell them what I'm doing. I am disappointed because I'm never encouraged by XYZ, by my husband or my spouse, whatever, right? The source, what is the source of your frustration? You can't just be walking around willy-nilly. You have to identify what it is. Number two, who are you and what do you want? That is the essential, as we talk about liberation and freeing your mind and understanding that you want to be emotionally emancipated. Who are you and what do you want? And knowing that that's okay to say. Third, be honest. Say what you need. Even if it's only to yourself, say what you need. I need time to myself. I need people to be respected. I need my family to stop treating me this way. Begin to say it to yourself so you can begin to articulate it to other people. Begin to say it to yourself and be honest about it. I need to be left alone for 30 minutes a day. I need to be left alone before everybody when I come into the house. I need to be held until everything's going to be all right. Be honest and say what it is to yourself, even if it's only to yourself. Number four, create boundaries. Right? Talk about what you can and can't do. Boundaries are going to be essential. have to be clear about what you can and cannot handle. Don't fool yourself. Love does not fix all of those things. Love will only frustrate you in those particular places. Be honest. I love you enough to tell you this is as far as I can go. Right. And that's honest. That's what love does.
Yeah.
Love is honest. Love doesn't cop out. Love is honest in that. I love you to tell you that I can't do but this for so long. Right. That's what love is. You have to create those boundaries. Talk about what you can and can't do. Right? And you have to enforce your own safety and wellness. Meaning that you have to, as you create those boundaries, you have to enforce them. People are going to try to impede. Families going to try to impede. People are going to try to manipulate. People are going to try to get around them. You have to begin to teach yourself and train yourself to establish a certain emotional wellness for yourself. That doesn't mean you have to be rigid. Doesn't mean you have to be closed off. This is not permission for people who want to be antisocial to be antisocial. That's not what this is. This is how we engage healthily in relationships. I don't want none of y'all walking around talking about, well, Dr. Small said I had to with none of y'all. I'm done with none of that. What we're talking about. Society. What I'm saying is how do you maintain healthy relationships? People who might be detrimental to your well-being. And in all things, if you need to, make sure that you are talking to a therapist, a counselor, or somebody who can help you prioritize. You need somebody who is objective in your perspective. Talking to family members ain't gonna do it. Because what you're gonna do is create a triangle situation. And then I'm done, then I'm finished. A triangle situation is when A, right, talks to B, right? A talks to B because they upset with C. Right now, what happens is they should be going to C to talk about what's happening, right? But what happens is we bring somebody else in because that relieves the stress. We release stress. Now, what happens with a triangle? We never resolve the issue. It's never resolved because we didn't go to the person, we didn't go to the source, right? We just resolved we just it's our own tension, but we created another situation because now B's running around here possibly talking to C. Or they know all the information or they know what's happening. So family dynamic doesn't necessarily always do it. We do it constantly because that's our immediate source. But what we really need to do is really kind of look at how we can get help and therapy from somebody from an objective perspective. So that's what we need to do. Genesis 50:20 talks about that story with Joseph and his brothers. His brothers sold him away. But Joseph says, listen, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done. And you have to understand the experiences that I've had, I'm turning them around and I'm working around for my benefit. So that's how we're doing. That's what we're looking at when we talk about family trauma. And so we thank you very much. And so we got a couple of minutes left. So let me know what questions we got, man. I tried to.
Man, listen, first of all, while they're ginning me up, Doc, man, you talk like you know something, Doc. I love it, Doc. Man, it was very powerful, man, very powerful. It's very, very powerful. And I mean, it's one of those things that we transfer and that the trauma that we've experienced in our families even into the family of God. And expectations around. While they're loading up some of the questions for me, can you talk about how you see some of these dynamics play out in church culture?
Yeah. Well, churches are families, right? Yeah. Churches are families. Can you hear me? Okay. Yep. Churches are families. So it's like you say, it's the family of faith. Churches are families. And in families, you have different roles and responsibility in family, right? Watch this. So there are people, like when I got to both my churches, there were people who were, let's call them hell raisers. Let's call them hell raisers, troublemakers, starters, right? And so I'd go to other people and I'd be like, oh, such and such and such and such. I can't believe they said that in the meeting. I can't believe they did that, whatever. And somebody would say, that's just them. That's just what they do. That's just who they are. Don't nobody pay attention to them. That's just it. Now, they have an identity. Right? And they know they have an identity, but because they're part of the family, right? It is not looked at as necessarily burdensome or troublesome, but for those of us in leadership, it brings those kinds of dynamics, right? And when those people leave, when those people shift, right? That's why sometimes we have that rotation. right? In church dynamic, right? Because somebody will join your church, right? And they can't find that spot they want, so they leave, right? Because either somebody got it,
Yep.
or
Yep.
they can't work it, or they can't carve it out, right? So I mean, it does speak to that family. The other thing is understanding that the text, the scripture is absolutely correct in talking about Jesus saying he hasn't come for the well, he's come for the sick, and that the church is absolutely a hospital, right? Hurt people, and folks come with that sense of brokenness, right? Believing and hoping, I believe, that, Jesus will fix it, that the Spirit's going to work it out. I tell my people all the time, I said, some of us need Jesus and 50 minutes on the therapist's couch. You know what I'm saying? Some of us need Jesus. Some of us need
Jesus and a good
and
therapist. Yes, sir.
Somebody need Jesus and
Yes, sir.
Prozac. Right? Y'all need Jesus and Wellbutrin. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, it's different kinds of things that we need to. So it's a definite dynamic of the family system and how it operates and what people do.
Excellent. I got 3 questions I'll get to. First question is, how do you begin the process of reconciling with a family member that was the source of your deepest pain? How do you begin the process of reconciling with a family member who was the source of your deepest pain?
Well, the Matthew text would be the initial place, right? To if they are emotionally able to go to that person, right, and not to operate from a context of blame, right, but simply go to a place of conversation. Hey, I wonder if I talk to you. There's something that's been on my mind for a long time, and I want to know if I can share my thoughts about it, right? And what you want to do is simply talk about your perspective of it. This is how I see it. This is how I experienced it. This is how it was to me. It's not going to work if you go in and say, you did. They're going to shut off. They're going to mostly cut you off. So you have to operate from a place of how you saw it. This happened, this went down, and this is how I internalized this. And this is how it affected me. And I wanted to bring this to you because it's been bothering me for a long time. And the other assignment, the difficult part of that is, and this is the quick answer, the difficult part of that is whether or not they admit it or not, you still have to move forward with your own wellness, right? If they say, oh yeah, well, yeah, that was small. Yeah, I ain't really seeing that, right? Because what is it you want? That becomes, who are you and what do you want? What do you want? Are you looking for them to make penance? Are you looking for them to apologize? Are you looking for them to acknowledge? Are you looking for them to heal? Are you looking for the relationship to reconcile? What is it you want, right? And have to be clear about those things articulated. I just want you to acknowledge this. Well, I ain't going to acknowledge it. Okay, well, thank you. I had the opportunity for you to do that. I want to, because of this, I want us to heal. Oh, okay, well, let's heal. Okay, well, then what does that look like? How do we work on reconciling? So you have to kind of know those kinds of things. But a lot of it does depend on the individual, right? Because if they're scared to admit it, or they're scared to act like they want to reconcile or acknowledge it, which might be painful because it may have been a very, very bad time for them or a very bad look for them. Then, you have that's part of the risk of relationship.
Thank you, man. Second question. Why, when you decide or want to separate the members of a family that are hurting you emotionally, why is there so much guilt, especially when you are considered the matriarch of the family?
Read it again.
Read it again. Okay.
Read it again.
Why, when you decide or when you want to separate from the members of a family that are hurting you emotionally, why is there so much guilt? I'm assuming that's the person that's asking, especially when you are considered the matriarch of the family. So when you try to do something different, why do you have the guilt?
Because the groups are not about individuals. Groups about groups. So when you say, I'm going to do something different, it is a critique of the group. And what you feel, mother, as the matriarch, I'm calling you mother as the matriarch, what you feel is guilt because I would probably assume, I've been doing this for a minute, I would probably assume that you are a people pleaser. And so you have had that role for a long time to make things better, to fix people's situations, to help people out, to do those kinds of things. And so now that you were saying, yo, look, this is too much, this is kind of toxic for me, this is too much to handle, I have to find that place to individuate. I got to find that place to separate myself from my own well-being. There's going to be resentment because, again, the system is shifting, the system is changing. Who going to do that now that you ain't? Who going to be there to hear us complain now that you're not, right? So the guilt that you feel is the sense of the false sense of having to fix everybody. And let me liberate you right now. Your assignment is not to fix everybody. Your assignment is not to help everybody. Your assignment is not to turn everybody's situation around. Your assignment is to help where you can when it's good for you, but it's ultimately to look out for yourself and to take care of yourself emotionally. You're not a selfish person if you're feeling this kind of guilt, and you're probably being exploited on some level from these other people. And you need to have, a sense about John Cloud and Henry Townsend have a great book called Boundaries. All of y'all need to get it. Everybody needs to get a book called Boundaries. John Cloud and Henry Townsend. Start reading the book on boundaries. They got different ones. Boundaries in marriage, boundaries in dating, boundaries with kids. But read the first one, Boundaries first. That's good.
All right. Third question, how do we as leaders help ministries become better trauma-informed and sensitive to these issues?
Well, you want to have discussions like this. You want to do, places where you want to create spaces where people can articulate how they feel, some support groups perhaps, or direct people to support groups, because you want people, and I'm sure you have in Mount Airy, you're a very, very gifted group of people. You want to have MSWs like myself and LCSWs and professional counselors and psychologists and people who would be willing to have those kinds of discussions. And there's something about support groups as well. There's support groups that can talk about how to work through things. Even church hurt. There may be even room for a church hurt discussion group. And you might want to get somebody from the outside who's not, a member of Mount Airy to facilitate, but, get somebody, to really talk about those things and help heal those particular places. To acknowledge trauma is not to heal from it. Healing from trauma is an ongoing thing. For many people, it's a lifetime thing. And so to acknowledge it is just the first step. There are 5 steps, there are 5 stages of change, real quick. We'll go through these. 5 stages of change: pre-contemplative, contemplative, preparation, action, and maintenance. So pre-contemplative means ain't no problem. You convince yourself ain't no problem. Contemplative says there may be something I need to look at. Preparation says, okay, how do I prepare for the change because I see something wrong? Action means I'm actually doing something to make a change in my life, and maintenance means I'm maintaining it. I'm keeping it moving at a certain level. So a lot of times people are at pre-contemplative place where they're like, well, ain't nothing really wrong, ain't no real problem. Contemplative is like, there's something wrong and I maybe need to look at it, and then your preparation. And people are in places of preparation, but preparation is not action. Action is different. You have to actually do some things, and then you have to maintain it for a while. So it's an ongoing thing for a lot of people, and sometimes it's a lifelong thing, but it can be done if you just have to understand that you're constantly working on it. It's almost like an NA or AA thing. You're never really done because moments can trigger it, right, to pull us and snatch us back, and we go back to 9 years old again. We go back to 12, not in age, but in our thinking. We go back to that place, that experience, that feeling that we have.
Excellent, man. We got 2 more questions, cool. And we'll be done. we cannot minimize the stress that is in our cultural experience. How do we name this without people responding as if we are using this race, culture, as an excuse?
That's a good question. My argument is, and this is not a cop out. I promise you, it's not. That ain't my problem.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, sometimes you have to call something out, even if people are uncomfortable. The other side of that clip we saw with Troy and Corey, right, when he's talking and telling that story, is a place where I think Black people need to be. It's lousy for family, but it's great for race relations. What did he say? He said, why do I do all of this? You got a roof over your head, you got food, you got clothes. Why do I do that? He said, because you like me? He said, no. He said, it's because I'm obligated and I'm feeling my responsibility. He said, at the end of the day, this is what he says, don't worry about if people like you. Worry about if people do what's right by you. And I think that's where Black people need to be. We need to stop worrying about if white folk like us. We need to make sure that they do right by us.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we can call out stuff, the fact that we can say this is wrong, the fact that we can say this is an injustice and they get bent out of shape, I don't care about that. What I care about is that you do right. I don't even care if you like me. I don't need the Klansman to put his arm around me and say I'm okay. I don't need the Aryan to say I'm cool. I don't need my politician to say, yo, he like me. What I want him to do is, or her to do, is give me all the policies and stuff that I am equal and owed to, just like everybody else. Make sure people do right by you. Now, I'm not minimizing your question, my brother, my sister, I promise you. But it's difficult to be able to articulate that for people who are unwilling to recognize the damage that has been done, right? What would you do if you went to the rapist and said, yo, you raped me? The natural action is to say, no, I didn't, right? And so you can't get bent out of shape if the rapist is uncomfortable for being called out for being what they are, right? And so I think there has to be an honesty. Can it be done in love? Absolutely. Can it be done with a sense of wanting to work with other people? Sure. But if they don't, make sure people do right by you. Make sure people still respect. It doesn't have to be a crutch if it's the truth. It's not a crutch if it's the truth. You don't want to make it the excuse for you not to do. See, that becomes the thing. We don't want it to be the excuse that we don't produce, right? And if that's what you're saying, then we have to teach each other how to produce despite what the situation is. We have to produce and teach our young people to produce despite the obstacles, despite the challenges, and despite what they have. And to do that, the frame of reference is just to look at our history. We did more when they gave us less. You know what I'm saying? My cousin, Reverend Ben Whipper, used to say, colored people built, Bishop College and St. Paul, and Morris Brown and Tuskegee and Howard, and Blacks and African Americans let them close down. When we was Negroes and coloreds, we built these schools. When we became Blacks and African Americans, we don't send enough money for them to stay open. We did more when we were given less. And so we need to understand those. We need to understand those concepts in our own mind. What to produce, regardless of to individuate, means that I love me, even if you don't like me. Even if you upset with what I'm doing, I still like me. And that's where we need to be as people. Make sure people do right by us.
All right. It's the last question, man.
That's
As we recognize ourselves in these unhealthy patterns or relationships, how do we show up differently in family members' expectations?
You have to, what we talked about, changing your behavior, changing your patterns, you have to define that for yourself. What does that mean? If you have that kind of family where you can talk through things, maybe there's places where you can talk about your frustrations, talk about some things that you've had, like we talked about, that Matthew text, going to them honestly, but you're talking about showing up differently. That means you don't engage in the same behaviors, right? Just change the behaviors you do. right? If you at the table and somebody start, antagonizing you for, well, where your man? Why ain't you married? I'm not, you know what? I'm not, that happens a lot when I come out with you guys. When I'm together, that happens a lot. But I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to have those kind of conversations. My personal life is my personal life, and I'm happy with it, and it is where it is going to be right now. You know what I'm saying? That in itself is a difference, right? And so, and that doesn't mean they're gonna stop. That doesn't mean they're gonna be like, well, what you mean, girl? Or what you mean, dude? It doesn't mean they're gonna stop, but you still have to reinforce. No, like I said, I'm done talking about that. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that in this session. I ain't talking about that like we always do. To change the pattern forces other people's behavior to change. And so some of that, and what that also might mean, as we talk about distance, healthy distance, and no distance, what that might mean is you don't make it to every function. That might mean you don't make it to every function. I don't make it to everything because I can do them in doses. Some of y'all know what it is. Y'all go, it's a crazy thing. We miss them. We talk to them on the phone. We can't stand to be without them for 5 minutes. Then we get in the house with them together, and 10 minutes in, it's crazy, right? Something has to change in that behavior. Something's got to change in that. And so what that might mean is that I don't come this year, or I don't come for the next couple of years, and we talk about how that looks. But the change has to begin with you. It has to begin with the individual. And so you have to really work through what those changes will be.
Doctor, let me just thank you. If we had a Zoom call or a larger, please, but on behalf of all the people tuning in, I know it's dozens and more than 100 people that are tuned in, man, on a Saturday evening, getting this knowledge. Because we know the culture around us is toxic, and we know our families can be toxic. So we need that word that you provided. Man, Mount Airy, you may not know, some of you may not know that we are blessed by this presentation, blessed by Dr. Smalls, but you need to know we're blessed because I was connected to Dr. Small primarily initially through his cousin, the Reverend, the one and only Thomas Williams, who was our assistant for years. Yeah. And so Dr. Small is always a part of Mount Airy family. Yeah. And so we're thankful for Thomas and Dorothy and that whole family, and we're thankful for Dr. Small.
And Tammy makes you.
And Tammy. Oh man, yeah, bless her spirit. We just thank God for her spirit. Thank God for her spirit. It lives on. Listen, we've had a great time, Mount Airy. We thank you. Thank you, Dr. Small. Thank you, bro. Man, you just hit it out the park, man. You blessed us. So Mount Airy, come on, tune in tomorrow. We start at 9:15 with announcements. Then we'll do the centering moment at 9:20 to 9:30, where we'll do some meditation. And then at 9:30, we'll do some praise and worship. And then we'll look to hear the word of God. Bless you. Again, join me in just giving a wave offering to our brother who just blessed us so. Man, we love you, Doc. Mount Airy, we'll see you in the morning. God bless you. God keep you, is our prayer.
All right. Bless.